Hi everyone, and welcome to Armagh Observatory and Planetarium. And today we're chatting to Tom Kerss, author, astronomer, astrophotographer, and science communicator. So hi Tom, and thanks for joining us today.
Hi, it's a pleasure.
So we'll have 5 questions that have been put to us just to ask you to get a bit of an idea of what you do and what it's like to be an astronomer.
Okay, I'll do my best for you.
Start it, try not to be too taxing. So the first one then really was, were you interested in the night sky from an early age? What led you to your career as an astronomer, really?
That's a good question. I think I was very lucky, actually. Lucky in that my parents were really encouraging when it came to the kinds of things that I wanted to study. And at a young age, I was already interested in the natural world. I actually grew up, I live in London now, but I actually grew up all over the place because my father used to be in the Royal Air Force, and that meant that we moved around a lot. So one of the places that I actually spent some of my childhood was right up near the north coast of Inverness in Scotland, in a place called Murray, near a little town called Milltown. And up there is a beach at the River Lossiemouth, where you can north up towards the Arctic Sea. And we used to stand on that beach, and I can remember very vaguely, although I was very young, seeing the aurora borealis just on the horizon.
Wow,
And
really?
my dad, who used to fly planes up into the Arctic, would tell me these stories about how the aurora looked overhead from the panoramic canopy of a fighter jet. How that just became mythology to me as a child. So growing up, I really wanted to get connected with the sky. And when I was sort of old enough to have my own telescope and take it out, I started to go out and discover all sorts of things. And I felt like I was Galileo myself. The first time I saw everything, the first time I saw the rings of Saturn, the first time I found Neptune on my own, the first time I resolved it was like discovering it all over again, as if I was the first person on Earth. So from a young age, yes, I was very interested. And fortunately, my parents were very understanding, and they did a lot to help encourage that interest as well.
Well, that's great. It's such an inspirational childhood then, to be able to do all that from such a young age. Yeah, that's great.
Yeah, very fortunate. And you know, I will certainly say as well that although my parents were very helpful, I have to also credit, you know, very good teachers. Some of the most important people in my life were school teachers who could see that interest and play just such an astonishingly important role in shaping the interest and ultimately the careers of young people as well.
That's it too. So inspirational teachers, probably lead us on then maybe to the second question. What would you say is really the most interesting or satisfying part of being an astronomer, and also then on the other hand, the least?
Yeah, the most interesting. Oh, that's such a unique sort of question, isn't it? Because everybody's interest is sparked in different ways. But certainly, the thing that drives me when I think about what I do for a living is just basically being paid to explore space in some way. Of course, if you're an astronaut, you have the opportunity to go to space. But when I used to work in the planetarium here at the Royal Observatory, which is near where I live here in Greenwich, people, sometimes the younger kids would call us ground astronauts, because we would explore space, but from the comfort of our own planet, which is of course very comfortable, isn't it? So having that opportunity to actually look up into space and really think about the reality of what you're seeing, those real star systems, trillions and trillions and trillions of miles away, with real planets that are as real as the one we live on, but we don't know much about them. And just thinking about all the stuff that's out there and how it all got there, and what must be going on that we don't know about, you know, across the universe. So astronomy, whichever aspect of it you're studying, you're sort of putting together the pieces of a large puzzle, and that puzzle is the entire universe. And there is no bigger subject really to think about. So it's very engaging. In terms of what is the least interesting aspect, well, I think again it's going to be very personal, isn't it? For me at least, I actually struggled a lot with mathematics at school, and I had to have extra help with maths. I was not a very natural maths student. But I did get through it in the end. I would say if I can get a degree in astrophysics, you definitely can, because I did struggle with maths. And I've always found that sometimes, you know, putting together the more complex and, shall we say, the more tedious elements of how mathematical solving works in astronomy, for example, writing programs to solve things, that for me has always been relatively unengaging, and I've had to push myself through it with the understanding that this is just the kind of the technical bit under the hood for the beauty of understanding the universe.
Exactly. And I think probably a lot of people don't realize that aspect of it as well. It's not just all stargazing, looking at the night sky. There is a lot of mathematics and physics behind it as well. Yeah,
that's right. There's actually a quote on the wall at the Royal Observatory, which was written in the Victorian era, and it describes the life and work of an astronomer. And I'm paraphrasing here very much, but one of the things that it says is that being an astronomer is a little bit like being an accountant. You're talking about meticulous attention to detail, to numbers. That is what it's like most of the time. The kind of romantic imager of the astronomer sitting at her telescope and gazing up at the sky is a little bit, that's what you see in films and cartoons. And it's not quite like that in real life. But I think at the very least, it does have elements of that. And the romance and magic of astronomy is very real for the thousands of people around the world who are making it their career today.
Absolutely, yeah. Well, it leads me on maybe to another part of your career. So you're also an astrophotographer. In that role, is there a favourite location or subject that you'll go back to time and again to photograph?
Yes, astrophotography is such a wonderful hobby, and literally anyone can do it, and you can do it with any device. There's so much variety in astrophotography. Most people get started with the moon. They might move on to photographing planets and maybe planetary conjunctions. And then it gets a little bit trickier when you want to take pictures of the Milky Way or nebulae and star clusters, or even other galaxies, which are very challenging to bring out in detail. For me personally, my favorite thing to photograph probably is and forever will be the moon. For one thing, it's very forgiving. It's the brightest object in the night sky, but it's also a world of endless change, and there's dynamic range on the moon, from the depths of the deepest shadows to the brilliant highlights. There's actually a lot of ways that you can challenge yourself to bring out the details across the surface of the moon. One of my favorite things to do as well, something that has really only become possible quite recently, is to greatly exaggerate the amount of color that we see in photographs of the moon, because it allows us to sort of explore the details of the moon in a quasi-scientific manner as we look at the mineral elements across its surface and how they reflect back different colors of light. And it's tempting to think the moon is just gray. I'm going to try something here. I actually have a little piece of the moon. I'll see if my camera will focus.
Wow, yes.
This is a tiny little piece of a lunar meteorite, and up close it is actually gray and pink. So it's a kind of combination of pyroclastic material that was created in a massive impact event, probably from one of the more rugged regions of the lunar surface. But indeed, if you take a photograph of the moon and you exaggerate the color a great deal without pushing it too far, it is possible to bring out colors like blue and yellow and various shades of pink and coral. There are so many subtle colors there. So that's a really fun photographic exercise, and it just kind of adds to the many, many ways that you can go and capture the moon. For me, that's probably always going to be my favorite subject.
The go-to.
I also think it's the best place to get started as well.
Yeah, exactly. Well, another then a thing is being a judge on the Insights Astrophotographer of the Year, which must be such a difficult task. I've looked at some of the entries and they're all just so amazing. I don't know how you ever narrow it down. So what do you look for in a winning entry, and sort of any tips? As you said, you've gone through a few there on the moon for any budding astrophotographers.
Yeah, that's right. I was a judge for Insight Investment Astronomy Photographer of the Year last year. I hope one day to return to the judging panel, and I'm doing a little bit of consultancy this year, but I don't have the insight this year on what the judging panel is doing. But I have seen how the competition has evolved over about 7 years or so. It's in its 12th year now, and it really is a very interesting competition because of the variety of categories. So it really doesn't matter, you know, where you go into astrophotography, what you excel at or find as your favorite subject. There's basically a category for you, and if you're new to astrophotography, there's a special category for you even there, so that you can go and get better acquainted with astrophotography and then enter a world-class competition. You never know. what do the judges look for? Everybody has a different idea, but I think there are several things that all the judges do agree on. One is that we look for images that are world class. So these images essentially are reaching the top of their particular game in the category that they're approaching. Now, of course, when we're talking about things like galaxies, when we're talking about nebulae in deep space, take a world-class image of something like that can be very challenging. It can involve a lot of equipment, it can involve a lot of time, a lot of expertise, maybe many years of experience is required. But that isn't the only area where photographers can surprise and impress the judges. One other area which I think is very special to consider is looking at something that's quite new and creative. So finding a creative way to present something. And I'll give you an example. There's a British astrophotographer called Steve Brown. And I remember some years ago, before I was a judge on the competition, that Steve entered a picture of a wiggly trail of light. And this was actually a photograph of the brightest star in the night sky, Sirius, which from the UK, it doesn't rise very high. So it tends to flash all of the colors of the rainbow as its bright light goes through the atmosphere. It's refracted by the moving air between us and that star. So what he did is he just deliberately wiggled his telescope around for about 4 seconds, and this created this artificial, completely abstract trail of light. But what was really nice is you could see all the different colors in the trail that the star had taken on over that period of time. So it was this remarkably abstract image, but it just made the judges look again at something they were so familiar with, this star Sirius, and being able to get space nerds to take a second look at something that they've seen a million times, that's a really, really impressive creative feat. So if you can find a way to be a bit creative and show the sky in a way that maybe no one else has thought of yet, then you do have a shot at taking a world-class image.
Anybody does then, So really, our last question then, something probably is a bit topical at the moment. So there seems to be a bit of a debate with astronomers as to whether our enforced lockdown at the moment has sort of reduced air and light pollution, therefore making the sky a bit darker or a bit brighter for night sky gazing. Do you have any particular views on that, or is it too early really to say there's been a change?
Yeah, I keep a log of observations, and many stargazers will note down what they see and what the conditions were like. And I've just been doing it since I was very young, so it's a habit. And I did compare my log for April of 2020 to the previous 3 Aprils, and it compared very favorably in terms of the clarity of the sky. So this was the ability to see things, particularly faint things, but also to see details on the moon with a powerful telescope. Now, what this tells me is that perhaps in April, we have seen a reduction in the turbulence and the particulates in the sky. And we know from the satellite observations that there are fewer particulates that are characteristic of air pollution in the sky. We also know that these aerosols do scatter light preferentially, and so they're a major contributor to light pollution. It's not just the amount of light on the ground, but it's also the actual clarity of the air above us and how much of that light is bounced back to us. So in one area, the sky has measurably improved, and I would say that probably the amount of pollution is a little less. Now, it's quite negligible unless you're got quite a keen eye for it, or you've been recording your observations for some years. But that's not to say it's not a fantastic time. And personally, I think that whatever's happened with the sky, there are fewer planes, which means photography is easier. There are fewer cars on the road, which means that the nights are just a bit quieter as well, a bit more relaxing. And stargazing is a brilliant thing to be doing in lockdown, because after all, when we look at the sky, we are kind of accessing nature, something that we know is good for us. It's good for supporting robust mental health. And perhaps access to nature is a little bit restricted during the day right now. But also when we look at the sky, we're sharing the experience with millions of other people. I like the thought that if I'm out stargazing tonight and you're out stargazing tonight, we are stargazing together. And that is a social activity. And, my social life at the moment is pretty dull. So I'm sort of looking for anything I can get. And if we can stargaze together, even if we're far apart, for me, that's a valuable thing.
Exactly. And I found, I don't know, well, as I said, wasn't sure, I don't know where I stand on the debate, but certainly I found the last few weeks, the skies have been clear. There's been so much to see and so many interesting things that we have found everybody's
it just seems
in.
as well that, as is typical for the UK and Ireland, that, if we're all going to be stuck indoors, of course, the weather's going to be a little bit extra beautiful.
Of course.
That's always the way it goes, isn't it?
Of course. Well, Tom, that's our 5 questions that were submitted. Thanks so much for taking part and giving us lots of inspiration rather, for our viewers and for us at AOP as well. And thanks everyone for watching. Hope to see you again soon.